On this Saturday night, the escalating fight in Nova Scotia. A suspicious fire at a lobster facility.
We view it as a hate crime.
Will the federal government intervene in the battle between Indigenous and commercial fishers? COVID-19 benefits in limbo.
Lots of long delays, people very frustrated.
More problems with the government agency distributing badly needed funds. The surging COVID-19 numbers in the U.S.
Every part of the nation is going to be lit up by infection.
And the controversial call for herd immunity. Plus, how Europe is trying to manage travel and keep the pandemic in check. Good evening and thank you for joining us. There is a disturbing development in the escalating violence of an Indigenous lobster fishery in Nova Scotia. A lobster pound being used by Mi'kmaq fishers has been completely destroyed by fire. This is all that's left of the facility. Investigators are calling the fire suspicious. One man, considered a person of interest by the RCMP, is in hospital with critical injuries. It happened near the southern tip of Nova Scotia at one of the two sites raided by commercial fishers this week. Public Safety Minister Bill Blair just released a statement saying the temperature of this dispute must be lowered now. The threats, violence, and intimidation have to stop. Blair has approved extra RCMP support in Nova Scotia, but as Ross Lord reports, Indigenous leaders say the federal government should have stepped in weeks ago.
In these images, the pattern of violence surrounding the Nova Scotia lobster fishery takes a harrowing leap forward. A lobster pound used by Indigenous fishers to store their catch set ablaze in what RCMP call a suspicious act.
Well, it's the worst fire. I've been in the fire department for 40 years and it's the worst fire I ever seen. Like the heat was so intense that you couldn't go anywhere near and it was hard to fight.
I heard like the crackling noises, and as soon as I heard that, I totally knew what it was. So I looked out the window and I could see like orange glow, and I woke my husband up and they're burning it down.
RCMP say a man is in hospital with what they call life-threatening injuries. They say the man is a person of interest in the fire investigation.
It's disgusting, and I can't imagine how or why they would target it like that.
Cops can't even control these guys, and there's a lot of them.
The lobster pound was the center of violence Tuesday night when an Indigenous fisher who brought his lobsters there for storage was forced to barricade himself inside while angry commercial fishers removed his catch. Commenting on the fire and the severe injuries that ensued, Sabaganagati Chief Mike Sack is taking the high road.
Still haven't heard lately on how the guy was making out there, but I hope there's a full recovery. And we had remorse for everyone involved, and we view it as a hate crime. It was directed towards people that we do business with, and it's very unfortunate.
A Supreme Court ruling 21 years ago upheld Indigenous fishers' right to earn a so-called moderate livelihood outside of regular seasons. But commercial fishers insist all harvesters should be subject to the same seasonal rules. With each violent episode, calls for peace become more urgent. Assembly of First Nations National Chief Perry Bellegarde is demanding a full and thorough investigation by the proper authorities. For several weeks, Indigenous leaders and commercial fishery reps have been urging federal politicians and agencies to help bring an end to escalating violence. The aftermath of this fire might give those warnings extra meaning.
So it just reaffirms what we've been asking for. You know, there needs to be more law enforcement in the area, more safety.
RCMP have announced charges against a man for allegedly assaulting Chief Sack in connection with an altercation Wednesday. Investigations continue into a slew of other incidents, including this, the most troubling episode yet. Ross Lord, Global News, Middle West Pubnico, Nova Scotia.
Canadians looking to apply for most COVID-19 benefits or even check the status of their applications are out of luck this weekend. The Canada Revenue Agency is doing what it calls routine maintenance. It's happening at a time when many Canadians are already having trouble getting the help they need. Abigail Bimman reports.
We regret the inconvenience. Disappointing. Jordan Rago was getting the CERB. Now he's applied for the new Canada Recovery Benefit. The application process opened Monday and he's had no luck, just an error message.
It doesn't provide me any information as to why I'm ineligible. There is not even a follow-up from that error message that's provided to applicants who apply online, where, what the next steps are, if they have to call, which department to call. And yes, from what I understand, I am eligible.
He's dealt with dropped calls and long wait times, and he's not alone. Hundreds posting their frustrations with the system in this Facebook group. Making things worse, no one can apply for any of the 3 new benefits right now. The CRA site and phones down for a full weekend for routine system maintenance. The CRA wouldn't comment on the timing of this outage, but told Global News in a statement some applications are not immediately approved, and in these cases individuals are receiving messages to call the CRA. This is because the CRA is performing more upfront verification to help ensure that CRB payments are being issued to individuals who are eligible. Rago says he was never told to call anyone. So far, the CRA said it processed more than 876,000 applications for the 3 new benefits. The others are the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit and the Canada Recovery Caregiving Benefit. Almost 600,000 of those were for the CRB. It hasn't said how many more people are having issues applying.
If they had extended CERB at least until after the scheduled maintenance, the people who right now are calling in, trying to can't get a hold of anyone, while they are worried about being able to keep food on the table, being able to pay for rent. This is totally unacceptable.
Opposition MPs say they've been getting lots of calls and emails too. The Conservatives blame the Liberals for proroguing Parliament, delaying the process.
We would have had at least 6 additional weeks to beta test, make sure we had all these programs. But as it was, unfortunately, the government put the civil service in a very difficult position, and that has left Canadians behind.
It's been challenging, to say the least.
The CRA tells Global News that only this Thursday did it begin sharing applicant data daily with the different government department that handles EI. The error code Rago and many others received is related to this. It's 026, and the CRA says anyone who got that code should try to reapply again on Monday. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.
Quebec has broken another record for new COVID-19 cases. The province says 1,279 people tested positive in the last 24 hours. That surpasses a previous daily high set on October 2nd. Ontario is reporting 805 new cases today. That's the 6th straight day of new cases above 700 in that province. COVID-19 cases in the U.S. are surging at an alarming rate, with hospitals in several states getting increasingly overwhelmed. The country has reported more than 8 million cases since the pandemic began, but 1 million of those were in the past 3 weeks. President Donald Trump, who was hospitalized with COVID-19, is carrying on with tightly packed campaign events, including a stop today in hard-hit Wisconsin. Jennifer Johnson reports.
New infections of COVID-19 are surging in almost every U.S. state, but more concerning to health officials, the rapid spike in hospitalizations. At least a dozen states are seeing all-time highs in patients being admitted for COVID-19.
I think that as we enter the fall and the winter, every part of the nation is going to be lit up by infection.
Florida, which is almost completely reopened, just recorded its highest death toll in 24 hours. Survivors like Deanna Hare, who spent 196 days in a Michigan hospital, are proof of how brutal the virus can be.
I was unconscious for about 2.5 months. My life and our lives have been changed forever.
In parts of Wisconsin, ICU beds are at 90% capacity. The state's positivity rate has hit 25%. The White House Coronavirus Task Force is urging residents to avoid large crowds, but U.S. President Donald Trump has refused to cancel a rally in Janesville, Wisconsin, Saturday night. As Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden continues to attack Trump's handling of the pandemic, White House officials are defending their actions.
Look, the president is out and about. The task force is meeting each and every day. We have our doctors out on the airwaves. We have our doctors out in local media addressing these communities directly.
In Minnesota, at least 20 cases of the virus have been linked to a Trump rally last month. In Georgia, pictures have emerged of tight, maskless crowds helping a state representative crowd surf at a Trump rally Friday night. Doctors fear Americans have grown tired of taking precautions, which are more important than ever as winter approaches.
There's nothing magical about 6 feet inside. And so if you're 6 feet apart and have your face mask off, you're still at risk of getting the virus or transmitting it to somebody else.
As the weather gets colder, more people are gathering inside, adding even more fuel to a pandemic that has already infected over 8 million Americans. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
The pandemic has changed so much in our lives, including the freedom to travel. Since the spring, European Union nations have implemented varying rules on who can enter each country without going into quarantine. Now, as Redmond Shannon reports, the countries have agreed on a new common policy to deal with rapidly changing infection rates across the continent.
COVID-19 has cut international air travel by 60% in Europe. That's partly down to the ever-changing mishmash of travel rules that differ across the continent. Confusing even for experienced flyers like travel blogger James Lorraine.
I kind of had to look three ways. So kind of to watch what the UK travel corridors were going to be, then see if the Scottish ones were going to be any different, and then see what countries were still allowing UK citizens in.
But 7 months into the pandemic, and the EU has finally decided to standardise the rules.
Today's agreement is a welcome improvement to a currently precarious situation.
The new traffic light system will allow passengers from low infection green regions to be allowed to travel without isolating. Coming from orange and red regions will require passengers to self-isolate or to provide a negative test. The EU admits some details need to be ironed out.
We will continue to work with member states on better coordination of testing and quarantine requirements.
Currently, none of the 31 participating countries have a nationwide case rate low enough to be classified as green, and just a handful have regions that are deemed safe. So the system will require passengers flying from airports in green regions to be honest about where they actually live. A standardised passenger declaration form is also in the works. But despite these new measures, case rates can change quickly.
I've been booking really kind of last minute. My flight to Germany was 8 o'clock in the morning, and I booked at, I think it was about 6:30 the night before.
Passengers travelling from Canada to some European countries do not need to isolate on arrival, but the Canadian government still advises against all non-essential travel. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Police in France say an 18-year-old of Chechen origin is responsible for the gruesome killing of a teacher. The country's anti-terrorism squad says the young man waited for the victim outside a school in a Paris suburb and asked students to help identify him. 47-year-old Samuel Paty was stabbed several times and then beheaded. Police shot and killed the attacker a short distance away from the scene. Paty had been the target of threats after showing students caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad during a lesson on freedom of expression. The teen was born in Moscow but moved to France as a refugee when he was a child. His parents and other members of his family have been taken into police custody for questioning. Tonight, Armenia and Azerbaijan will attempt another truce for humanitarian reasons after 3 weeks of fighting over the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh. Earlier today, Azerbaijan blamed Armenia for the deaths of at least 13 civilians in a missile attack on a residential neighborhood in the city of Ganja. More than 40 others were injured. Armenia denies it's responsible for the strike. The two former Soviet republics agreed to a ceasefire 1 week ago, but within hours that fell apart. At least 700 people have been killed since the conflict erupted. Serious allegations tonight from a Hong Kong pro-democracy protester. Alexandra Wong says Chinese authorities kept her in custody for a month and a half and barred her from returning to Hong Kong for nearly 14 months. She alleges she suffered mental abuse and was interrogated almost every day while in detention. The 64-year-old had been a familiar face at anti-government protests in Hong Kong before she vanished in August 2019. Coming up, how New Zealand's Prime Minister has become one of the most popular world leaders. Tonight, New Zealand's Prime Minister is celebrating an historic election win. With all votes counted, Jacinda Ardern's Liberal Labour Party won 49% of the vote, compared to 26.8% for the main challenger. The party has sealed an outright majority in Parliament, something that hasn't happened since New Zealand implemented proportional voting 24 years ago. Typically, parties must form alliances to govern, but this time, Ardern and her party can go it alone.
We will not take your support for granted, and I can promise you, we will be a party that governs for every New Zealander. Our plan is already in action and already working, but after this result, we have the mandate to accelerate our response and our recovery, and tomorrow we start.
Ardern is well known around the world, which is unusual for a leader of this peaceful nation of just under 5 million people. Her popularity soared earlier this year when she led a successful effort to crush the spread of COVID-19. It was a go hard and go early approach, but it hasn't always been easy for Ardern. Mike Drolet takes a look at her political rise.
Jacinda Mania was born from moments like this.
We're just having a bit of an earthquake here, Ryan. Quite a decent shake here. But
Not even a 5.8 earthquake seems to rattle New Zealand's Prime Minister. And to think Jacinda Ardern is still relatively new to the political scene. She was first elected in 2017 in an election she was supposed to lose in a landslide. What a difference 3 years makes.
I will make whatever New Zealand voters deliver work.
Just one more. But can she? Her first term was marred by broken election promises, and her popularity began to wane until a series of events thrust her into the spotlight. Shortly after being elected, she became only the second woman in modern history to give birth while in power.
Yes, I can do the job and be a mother.
She took a little time off, returning to become a leading voice on climate change.
Actually, this is about being on the right side of history.
And when a lone gunman killed 51 worshippers at a pair of Christchurch mosques, she immediately promised action.
I can tell you one thing right now. Our gun laws will change.
And while she joined her country in grieving the dead, she pushed through tough gun laws many thought impossible.
We will close our border to any non-residents and citizens.
She was as decisive in dealing with the pandemic, closing New Zealand's borders to foreigners in February, and after a strict lockdown announced in June, the country had effectively wiped out COVID-19.
I did a little dance.
Now the hard work begins for the leader dubbed the anti-Trump. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
Saving or costing lives. Still ahead, the immunity issue splitting scientists. In a pandemic, herd immunity is the holy grail, the point at which enough people are immune to protect those who are not. It can come from a protective vaccine or after enough people get infected. Now, a controversial declaration by a group of scientists suggests almost all schools and businesses around the world should reopen to expedite immunity from COVID-19. Other eminent researchers are aghast at an idea they say would cost more lives. Eric Sorensen reports.
When President Trump encourages crowds to gather without requiring masks or distancing, he is, in effect, promoting a strategy to speed up transmission of the novel coronavirus to achieve herd immunity sooner.
It happens. People have it and it goes, get the kids back to school. We got to get the kids back to school.
The approach would drop restrictions and allow the virus to run through the younger, stronger population while protecting the elderly and vulnerable. White House officials have cited the Barrington Declaration, signed by dozens of doctors, stating in part, those who are not vulnerable should immediately be allowed to resume life as normal. This Canadian doctor co-signed the petition.
I would like to see healthy young people get back to work because they're very low risk of COVID-19. The central point of the declaration is that lockdowns have the potential to cause harms not really related to COVID-19.
Harms such as delayed medical attention for other illnesses and mental health problems from social isolation.
I think that this plan would cause far fewer people to die overall, once you take into account suicides from unemployment.
But a wave of international researchers has responded with alarm to the idea that the vulnerable can be cordoned off from young people as they acquire immunity. Writing in The Lancet, it is a dangerous fallacy, unsupported by scientific evidence.
We are an incredibly interconnected society and intergenerational society. So for this, notion that we can, in some artificial way, segregate generations, it's utterly ridiculous.
Manaus, Brazil has been cited as a real-time example where herd immunity developed. After a tragic number of COVID-19 deaths, there was evidence the population had achieved a level of immunity around 50% or higher. The beaches opened up. Life largely returned to normal. But recently, cases of COVID-19 have surged once more, and researchers have raised the possibility that immunity, the antibodies after infection, may not last.
This is a disease or an infection that hasn't been around for a year. And so we have no idea about the durability of immunity after having been infected.
The World Health Organization is adamant that trying for herd immunity before there's a vaccine would do more harm than good.
Never in the history of public health has herd immunity been used as a strategy for responding to an outbreak. Allowing a dangerous virus that we don't fully understand to run free is simply unethical.
There's no modern playbook to ameliorate the health, social, and economic harm from COVID-19. And absent a vaccine, there are no easy answers. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Up next, how an Ontario man is helping keep a sweet tradition safe. Halloween is in 2 weeks, and a Toronto plumber is helping families slide into the spooky season safely. These candy chutes are making trick-or-treating possible while physically distancing. Jeff Burke saw the idea online and decided to make them in exchange for donations to the food bank.
So I'm in a couple of the neighborhood Facebook groups around here, and one Saturday morning I posted it on a few of these groups, and within 2 days we had more than 400 responses. We had to shut it down.
It's no wonder the chutes are in high demand. According to Stats Canada, over 4 million kids between the ages of 5 and 14 go trick-or-treating for Halloween. In October 2018, Canadians spent over $613 million on treats. 11% of those sales were for personal consumption. But here's the scary part. Canadians spend more per capita on costumes, candy, and decor than Americans, making Halloween the most expensive holiday after Christmas. And that is Global National for this Saturday. I'm Robin Gill. Tonight, your Canada is Edmonton. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a great night.